Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to welcome our guest of honor. A very good morning to our guest of honor, Mr. Steve Leonard, Executive Deputy Chairman of IDA, SMU President, Professor Arnaud de Meyer, Dean of SMU School of Information Systems, Professor Stephen Miller. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the launch of the Financial IT Academy at SMU. The Financial IT Academy at SMU, or FITA for short, is the lead provider to design and deliver quality training programs for technology and operations professionals in the financial services industry in Singapore. FITA will operate in a very unique space, offering courses for 15 major areas in banking and technology operations. To share with us more about the Academy, may we now invite Vice Provost of Research and Dean of SMU School of Information Systems, Professor Stephen Miller, to deliver his opening address. Professor Miller, please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. I'd like to welcome Mr. Steve Leonard, the Executive Deputy Chairman of IDA, Professor Arnaud de Meyer, our President of SMU, Ms. Tang Fang Yi, who's the Deputy Director and Head of Strategic Development for our Monetary Authority of Singapore, Ms. Ong Hui Si, who's the CEO of the International Banking, of the Institute of Banking and Finance. Sorry about that. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, those of you from the banks, from the vendors, from other parts of the financial services industry. A warm welcome to SMU, especially to those who it's your first time on campus. And thanks for joining us for the launch of the Financial IT Academy at SMU. So you'll be witnessing the launch of what we call the Financial IT Academy at SMU. Now, this is going to be integral to Singapore's national effort to expand both the number and the quality of the size of the IT professional workforce in the financial services industry. Back in the 28th of May, there was a dinner for the financial service industry. It was held by the Institute of Banking and Finance. And then MAS board member, who's also our acting minister for Culture, Community and Youth, Mr. Lawrence Wong. So at that dinner, he announced that IDA, together in partnership with MAS, had designated SMU to be the lead provider to design and deliver quality training programs for IT job roles in the financial service sector in Singapore, so that we get professionals with skills and capabilities in both financial sector and IT, because we need these kind of people to drive the design, development, and deployment of innovative solutions for the financial sector. So what FITA will do, FITA is what we call this initiative, the Financial IT Academy, will create distinct pathways for skill development and capacity building in the banking, finance, and IT sectors. All right. Now, we're working very closely with the Institute of Banking and Finance, because they run the certification scheme in the financial service industry, and with IDA, because they run the certification and other manpower development for the infocom industry. And we have to do this together with the banks and the IT service providers, because it is a national initiative. All right? Our emphasis is on working people, professionals, mid-career professionals, as well as people who may be in the earlier stage of just starting their career. All right? And then, if we do this right, it will enhance Singapore's position as the leading financial hub in Asia, because as some people have commented, without technology, there is no bank. Right? So this is core to how the banks operate. All right. And then we'll explain in a moment about the way in which we integrate the technology with the operations, processes, and service innovation. In the spirit of something about education, training, and competency development, Professor Miller will now deliver his first lecture. All right. The quiz will not be that hard. Okay, so let me just leave the script and just show you a few visuals that we think will help you understand. I'm teasing about this, but actually, when you try and teach people things, you actually have to show it to them in multiple forms of representation. Some things you get with your ears, something you get with your eyes, and you sort of have to have both of those things. All right, I'll come back to that theme in a minute. So, as we said a few times already, develop financial IT manpower for Singapore's FS sector. Now, obviously, we have to work together with the vendors for technology training. You have to be careful in banking about using the word core banking because it means something very particular in banking. But the core kind of technology that's used within financial service institutions. And what's really essential is this issue of integrating the understanding of the technology with the operations and processes, risk and compliance, which threads through everything, the business and IT system management issues, and service innovation issues. Because let's face it, the people involved with these kinds of IT work and process and operations work are always the ones who are the integral parts of the change initiatives. Now, we need to focus across the major segments of banking. Most of the people in the room are going to be familiar with this. I don't need to go into detail, other than to say these will be targeted short courses where we get very deeply into the particulars of the segments shown here, because they sort of each have their own aspect of products, services, operations, processes, and the concept of the innovation challenges. So what are we doing? In plain English, there's 4 categories of courses. And the categories are important. I'll explain why. So on the top left, the notion about core technology courses, where the focus is on the technology and not the domain. I know it's not my phone because I should have. On the bottom left, the emergent. Now, right now, if you sort of read consultant speak all over the world, everybody says, oh, the emerging thing is cloud, mobile, social, and analytics. But actually, that's been something people have already been saying for about 2 or 3 years now. And a year from now, 2 years from now, sort of the conceptualization of what is emerging is going to have to move off that sort of standard consulting background. Sort of a deeper understanding of issues like privacy, as an example. How people, you can't just do analytics at 100,000 feet. You need to talk about how banks are going to integrate external information with internal information or things like that. So we'll get down to that level of specificity. The hybrid FSI-IT. This is something we've really been working on at SMU for 7 years now, in the trenches through our MITB, our Master of IT Business Financial Service Program. How do you integrate the understanding of the technology with the processes, the operations, and the change initiatives? And people on the technology side, and in other parts of operations who work closely with the technology side, you're involved in large groups, large budgets, cross-enterprise initiatives, and change initiatives. So there's a core management part where we're trying to give people the management skills to be part of these initiatives and be effective parts of the teams that are parts of the initiatives. The point is, we need to do all 4 of these categories. We have the wiggle room, if you will, the freedom to sort of swap in what is exactly the course in one box versus the other. Right? Because that will be driven by the banks themselves, or to some extent the service providers, but to a large extent by the banks. So if a bank comes to us and says, we need X, and almost anything they're going to say is going to fit in this category anyway, will you do it for us? The answer is yes. So that's why we have specific courses laid out by topic, but for today's presentation, we're showing it to you in terms of the baskets, because that's really the more important way of how it's organized. Right. So, no presentation is complete without a 2x2 matrix to explain something. So if you don't have a 2x2 matrix, you sort of haven't gotten the thing explained yet. But Simply put, the first column, you're already in financial services. All right? The second column, you're not in financial services, but you want to be, or you need to be. The first row, you're an IT professional. The second row, you're not an IT professional. Now, there are a lot of people who do jobs. Let me speak about that bottom row. There are a lot of people who do jobs where maybe earlier in their career they weren't trained specifically in IT, but they work a lot with IT people, or the success of what they do depends on, just like you have IT people who bridge across with the business, there are a lot of people on the business side who, because of years of experience, have had to bridge across to the change initiatives, which always involve IT. So both those categories of people will benefit from what's going on here. And I'm not going to go through every cell. You get the idea. So we're going to focus on working professionals as well as new grads who can potentially enter into the sector. All right? Stop there. All right, why choose fita? I think there are two reasons. Because we're working with the national competency frameworks in an integrated way, working under the Institute of Banking and Finance, which is working under NAS, for the Financial Industry Competency Standards, and with NICF, which is the scheme that IDA has been developing for many years and is pretty widely applicable in the industry now. Okay? And sort of working at the intersection of these two. Now, some of you might be from the banks, and you'll say, really, how is a university, even a university that has spent a lot of time in the applied aspects of banking operations and technology, how are they ever going to know more about us to do this kind of training? Right? Reasonable thing. We'll never sort of out-detail the banks in terms of their knowledge of what they do. But here's what we can actually do better than the banks. We know how people learn. Our job is to really know how people learn. It is not just a question of saying, here is what today or yesterday's person does who does this job. Because when they get there tomorrow, it's not going to be that way. The details are going to change. So we have to have the details, of course. And we do that by working with the firms in the industry. A lot of you who work with us, you know that we do that. And we use our own faculty and adjuncts. But we have to put inside people's heads frameworks so they actually know how to think about this stuff and deal with uncertain situations. So we have to organize the knowledge into systematic and structured frameworks in a domain where there are no textbooks. All right? I can't go to like Finance 101 or Operations 101, right? Because there really are no standard textbooks on this side of banking. So in a way, we have to create the way people learn. We can do that better than the banks, and we've been doing it, right? But it's the partnership of the expertise that's out there and sort of the incredibly important everyday minutia, and then putting it into structures so people know how to put it all together and can operationalize the knowledge and apply it to new situations where we can be a world leader in that technology. In fact, that's why, in a sense, we're running fita, because we already are a leader in that. Right. This just gives an example of topics, not the full set of topics, but examples of topics across those four categories that I said, and we have to get them specified. Some of them in a common way cut across as horizontals, some of them execute a little bit differently once you're in each of these different boxes. Okay? Now, just a comment on this. If I hire you for cold storage, I could take you into a grocery store and say, the stuff comes in here at this doorway, and it sort of moves in here, and go look out on the shelves, and you can see where people check out. You can walk the process. You can see it. You can form a mental model in your head. You cannot walk the banking process. It does not exist in physical form. It is non-trivial to get people in their own head, not just to understand what their job is, but to understand what the concept of flow is in the banking process. There's nothing to physically observe, just rows of people sitting at desks and terminals, right? 30 years ago, it was easier to train people in banking processes because you could follow the forms. You could literally follow the paperwork. You cannot do that. So this issue of how do you get people to visualize transactions, flows, and processes so they can be part of teams and go to whiteboards and say, this is what's happening. All right? That's the kind of expertise that we have to have, very specific in this domain. Not generic, but very specific in this domain. We have to get participants to understand the linkages between concepts, systems, and processes. You have to do this from sort of a hands-on. One of the metaphors we have had for years is, and most of you are familiar with the industry, so if I say this, you'll sort of, in your head, get the image immediately. There's the screen, there's the world in back of the screen, and there's the world in front of the screen, right? The world in back of the screen is the data, all the stuff that's moving through the systems. The screen is the system itself. And then the world in front of the screen is the real organization of people, right? And for most people, it's a little bit of mental gymnastics to sort of merge those three in their head just for their job, just for their job. And maybe for some jobs, you need to understand that a step or two in front and a step or two in back. But the IT people's job is to understand the job of everyone else and to know the whole chain, to know the whole flow behind the screen, and in front of the screen. And let me tell you, we've been trying to do this for 7 years. It is not easy, okay? But I would say we have a leading worldwide position in how to organize knowledge to be able to do that. At the end of the day, this all sounds fine and well, but we all know what happens when you launch real initiatives. It comes down to the people running it. Right? Very briefly, because I want to wrap up here, Professor Miller's lecture time is about finished. Right? John Vaughn, Dr. John Vaughn is our head. Okay? He's our academic head. He's right here in the front row. John graduated college probably about the same year that I did, so let's not go into that, what year that was. He worked with HSBC for about 15 years at that time, what they affectionately called the MIS group, okay? And sort of did everything you would do in HSBC if, I think in those days you probably had to have a wider range of what you did. Today people are probably more specialized. And he worked in 5 Asian countries. He got very deeply involved in Indonesia's sort of reconstruction after the financial collapse in 1997. And he just shared with us that the IMF pulled him out of HSBC to help with getting banks back on operational track in Indonesia. And then he had a whole new phase of his career working with IMF, with the World Bank, and with the United Nations, working with banks in this region specifically to build up banking capacity in the developing nations. All right? So John's our academic director. He did a stint at NTU where he was the head of the MBA, including the track in banking and finance. And then he did a practice-oriented doctorate when he was in the UK. So he has sort of wonderful bridging kinds of capabilities. Some of you might know Karen from the industry. She's done stints at EBS, at OCBC in the consulting industry. And she teams with John on the sort of curriculum design. A really fascinating thing about fita is that it is deeply integrated into the mainstream of SMU. It's housed within the School of Information Systems. Some of our full-time faculty who are focused on banking technology and its integration with operations, processes, so forth, are very strongly involved. Many of you, if you've been in the industry a long time, you'll know Enoch. He was actually the one, he was hired by one of the MAS employees back in 1998, sort of one of the staff employees. I think his name was Tharman at that time. Okay. Really was hired by Tharman, right? And when he was deputy MD of MAS, and then Enoch actually was the one who started what is now known as the Supervisory Risk Group in MAS, and he ran that for a number of years. and then went on to do things in DBS. And he's been here for a number of years running our education training programs in this sort of banking, tech, and management area. Patrick, some of you will know from the industry, he's been involved in ANZ, UBS, DBS, did a stint with the World Bank in Washington. So he's here working with us with the program too, in addition to doing executive level initiatives, in addition to the professionally oriented initiatives. So without going, there's a lot of information on this slide. I'm not going to go through the detail, but just to say, this box represents fita. That's focused on professional level knowledge and competency. We're starting to run special things for executives because we train them in different kinds of ways. We've got what many tell us is the world's most established master's program for banking, technology, and its integration with processes and operations in the world. And we have that base. We're even running at the undergrad program special tracks in banking and technology. And then we're working with a number of banks on special projects that are part of the R&D and applied project ecosystem at SMU, often focused with the School of Information Systems, but often branching out into other parts of the university as well. So fita plugs into this network in a real way, not just a PowerPoint way. And that's it. This is my final statement, that our mandate is to become a strategic asset for the financial service sector in Singapore. So it's not just a presentation here, it's a survival game. We understand this. We know that we can do some pioneering things that are innovative and effective in terms of getting people to learn and perform in the area of FSIT education and training. And we're shooting to become, and actually I think we are, but we're going to keep moving in the direction of being Asia's premier education and training provider focused on financial service IT. So my message is, help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Miller.
Good morning. So, Steve and I have known each other for some years, but in this context, I guess I better refer to him as Professor Miller. So, Professor Miller mentioned some important things, one of which I guess I'm going to fail spectacularly at the beginning, which is no presentation is complete without a 2x2 box. And I have no 2x2 boxes in my presentation, so that's one. I only have a couple of pictures to speak from. Number two, I wanted to reinforce at the beginning that one of the reasons that I think this is such an important program, well, several reasons. One, financial industry is such a key economic engine for Singapore. And so I agree wholeheartedly with the idea that technology drives the financial industry, or supports at a minimum, whichever word you prefer, the financial industry. So it's so critical that we focus on additional skills and training. But if I think about it, the reason that this program I think is so special is because of the depth of capabilities with the people supporting it. So based on the CVs that you would have seen just a moment ago, people who have worked in senior leadership positions in technology, in banking, that know the issues, know what they're talking about. So advising firms or being in the firms themselves, I think makes this program all the more credible and all the more important. Let me touch a little bit just by going through and making sure that I pay respect. So I'd like to say good morning, thank you, of course, to Professor Arnaud de Meyer, the president of SMU, of course, Professor Miller, and then I have Ms. Tong Fang Yi and Ms. Hong Hui Si. So I wanted to also just make sure that we really look at the rich ecosystem of people who are here today to support this event. And I think it's a very exciting opportunity to make sure that we explore what we can do to continue to support the event, what we can do to continue to support the training. The reason that I have this graphic on the screen is I like the way it describes urgency and speed. And so, anyone in the room here from Visa? No? All right. So if I think about this, in the time that it takes Usain Bolt to run 100 meters, so less than 10 seconds, there's 19,000 transactions through Visa in that same amount of time. And so you think about the quantity of information, the velocity of information, the diversity of information. So how do you try and make sense of this huge amount and huge flow and huge complexity, increasing complexity? And so I think this is a really great way of kind of framing the issue that technology and banking are inextricably linked. I also really like this example. Apart from the fact that I think it's just a beautiful image, I like this example because it's recent and it's personal. If you think about the Formula One race in Singapore, it really is a fountain of data. And if you think about the cars going around the track, everybody knows, I'm sure, in some way, that all the cars are wired with a variety of sensors, and through the race, there's telemetrics that give the pit crews information on what's happening in the cars. What can be done to squeeze another hundredth of a second here and there makes all the difference. And the reason that that's so relevant is you saw a really good example of that just when the race took place a couple of weeks ago. For those that watched it, you may recall Mark Webber was going around the track, and as the race started to near its conclusion, his pit crew was on the radio to him saying, you have to short shift, right? Do not run the engine up so far to the red line, because they could see, based on the sensors in the motor, that the engine was starting to degrade. And so there's an example of real-time data coming back for the purpose of analyzing performance and having a positive impact, ideally, while there's still an opportunity. Now, as they were trying to nurse the car around the track, they were also trying to make sure they didn't fall so far behind, and for those that ended up watching it, the motor did explode into a ball of fire before they crossed the line. But the interesting part of that is they knew it was coming. The pit crew knew it was coming based on the data that they could see. Now the question is, how can we use data to try and make good decisions in as near real time as possible, in as many situations as possible, which is such an important opportunity for people in this room and the people that you have leadership responsibility for. There was a recent Deloitte survey done that said essentially across banking professionals, roughly 30% responded that they don't feel they have any analytics tools to use in their roles. Now, whether they do or don't, they didn't feel that they did have any tools. 6% said that they had what they considered to be best-in-class tools. So if you take that, fewer than 1 in 10 felt that they had enough great tools to make good use of all this massive amount of data that was available to them. And many, or a third, felt that they had no tools. So this is a really important scenario as we take a look around financial industry and technology, and that juxtaposition of now new and increasing amounts of tools and ways to analyze that data for the purpose of improving performance. Back to the F1 example. Okay, again, staying with the, I get to pick the slides, and I think these are nice images to look at. I think this is also a great example of a little bit about what we're trying to do as IDA. So from an IDA perspective, we're trying to think about hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure. And we think about this as hard infrastructure, meaning coral, and we think about as next generation fiber network or wireless sensor network across the island, or some of those big, difficult infrastructure-related things that we need to try and work on in order to be able to make innovation available or encourage innovation, which is more the soft infrastructure. Now, I really like this program, fita, because I think of it as soft infrastructure. Skills training, people, knowledge. Right? We can build fiber, we can build networks, but we cannot build anything else without great people and without the knowledge of people and the skills of people. So if we think of this as hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure, one really needing symbiotically to work with the other. So I like this because nothing in this picture can exist without everything in this picture. And so this idea of working together is really a critical message. So working together as industry, as academic, working together with great people that have experience in all of these different areas in order to provide more knowledge and more training really makes a big difference, and why I think fita is so important. Okay, another one here. Thinking about in order to upskill, upgrade. So it takes effort to become bigger and stronger. Not easy. Sometimes a little bit painful. You get a little bit sore, but you have to stretch. You have to learn new things. So this particular example, this isn't the particular gentleman, but the record around lifting is that for a person that weighed just over 100 kg, there was a 400 kg lift of total weight. So if you think about it, 4 times body weight, and the amount of training that goes into that over many, many years in order to have that capability. So if you think about this and stay with this, it's in order to become bigger and stronger, you have to stretch and push and gain in new ways. And sometimes those things take a lot of effort, but you're very fortunate that the fita program, I think, has given you as many tools as you're likely to find anywhere in the world. And we were chatting a little bit before the session that SMU has put itself in the position of really being unique around the world at having so many tools available to it in one of the financial hubs of the world. Okay, we think about this as what can we do, we IDA, what can we do with research institutes, academics, industry, and so we're excited to be a part of the things today because I don't think there is any more important area than the intersection of financial industry and technology, and then sort of the subsection there for my own purposes of analytics inside technology, which may be a little hot topic at the moment, may not be the thing in the 2 or 3 years, but I think honestly it's going to just be how do we learn to use it more and more effectively. Not that it falls out of fashion, it's just our knowledge of it gains more and more traction, and therefore the newness of it wears off. Just like e-commerce is no longer e-commerce, it's just how you tend to do business in some of these things. You don't think of it as e-commerce like you did some years ago. Now it's a way of doing business. And I think analytics will evolve to a way of doing business. Today we just describe it a little bit specially. The important thing here, though, is all of the banks, especially those with whom I worked in my previous lives, were always hungry for professionals that could help them learn new things, do new things, push in new areas. So everybody in the room, and those that you have leadership responsibility for, what a great career path, what a great opportunity for an economic reward, I hope, because there's plenty of hunger in the markets for people that have the skills that you have or are gaining. So, let me leave this one slide because this speaks to something that I think is important for IDA, for financial industry, for academic, and I like to just leave this one word here, which is, I think, encapsulating a lot of these ideas together. First, as a little short infomercial for IDA, we're trying to go back to the ability to build things, build technology, build products. We're not trying to compete with anybody, but we want to be a good partner, which means we have to know how to build. So we're doing a lot of things in this regard to re-encourage building. So nothing is financially tracked, there is no HR, there is no head of marketing, there is no anything without a product to represent. And so build is very critical. Financial industry is always looking for innovation. So as IDA, we're always looking for ways to encourage and support Singapore-based tech product companies. And we want to be more aggressive and more assertive in that. Not resellers, not integrators, not consultants, because there's a room and a place for all of those kinds of firms. We're looking for how do we support product, innovative product that helps companies do something better, faster, cheaper, whatever the metric might be. So build. And we need to build people, which is what Professor Miller was just describing. We need to build people. We need to make sure that we are continuing to build and create more and more talent within Singapore. So we need to build products, we need to build people, we need to build economic values and so on that continue to drive all the things that we enjoy today. So from that perspective, I'll leave you with, you're in a great place. fita is an outstanding program. I'm confident it will be another example of best in class for other people to aspire to. And please take this word and think about it during the day. Build. How do we build more together in Singapore? Thank you.
I'd like to invite Professor De Meyer as well as Professor Miller to join Mr. Leonard on stage for the official launch of fita. Gentlemen, at the count of 3, please place your hands on the launch pad. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Mr. Leonard, Professor De Beer, and Professor Miller. Please remain on stage. May we now invite Professor De Beer to present a token of appreciation to our guest of honor, Mr. Steve Leonard. Thank you, gentlemen. May we now invite you back to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the launch of the Financial IT Academy at SMU. Thank you for spending your time here with us this morning. We would now like to invite all of you to the lunch reception outside the auditorium. But please remain seated as our VIPs make their way to the reception. Thank you.